أعوذ بالله من الشيطان اللعين الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم وبه نستعين وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وأهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعجل فرجهم. From today onwards, we're going to start a new book about a person called Abdul Hussain Borunsi. He was a very simple man who lived about 45 years ago, and the book covers about his biography, that how he struggled and tried his best to follow Islam and the rulings of Islam and the ahkam of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and how his struggle paid him back by giving him the proximity of Ahlulbayt alayhi salam and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So this is basically the life of a simple man, and how he managed to ascend towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This story is not really far ago. It's just about 45 years ago from today. And the story covers the details about his lifestyle. However, before I get into the details of the story, let me give you a brief narrative of the time that he was living in. He was living in Iran 45 years ago, and the situation in Iran was that the Shah was ruling Iran, and he was in total dominance of the government here, and he was in absolute authority, and he more or less had a dictatorship in place. And the bigger challenge with Shah's ruling in Iran was that he was not allowing people to follow Islam and the rulings of Islam. You must have read in the history books that he had a special intelligence force called Savak, who was constantly on the lookout of people who were either promoting, preaching, or practicing Islam. So if anyone was spotted on the streets wearing hijab or wearing chadar, the Savak people would right there on the street either pull off her hijab or set her chadar on fire. So that was the kind of scenario then. So if anyone was spotted, be it a teacher or a ulama who was preaching or promoting Islam, particularly the political aspect of it, they were arrested and jailed and tortured, and some of them were even murdered in the jail. In the prisons. So that was the scenario here. There's a very famous incident here, that we have a very famous school here called Hujjatiya, and it was there from about 100, 200 years ago when it was established. So one day the intelligence of Shah, that is Sabak people, walked into this school and grabbed the tullab, that is the seminary students, took them to the terrace and threw them one by one from the terrace, and martyred about 50 to 80 of them. So that was the kind of scenario here, and this is the kind of environment in which Abdul Hussain Borunsi is living his life, and the biography covers the details of how he lived under such a rule and still managed to practice his religion, and how it benefited him in dunya and akhirah. So let's move on with the biography here. The detail of the biography is that this book, when it was written, Borunsi wasn't alive. So all the stories that are mentioned in the books are narrated by either his family members, parents, his wife, or his friends, or his superior officers, so on and so forth. So we are going to narrate the same stories from their point of view and bring them to you to express the struggle he went through, and to give you a clear picture of what following Islam can lead you to. So let's begin with the first story, which is narrated by his wife, and inshallah, going forward, we will try and send the audios like we used to send for the earlier books. She says that it was 1969 and they got recently married, and then she started realizing that why Borunsi married her, because he was looking for a family which was a pious family, and unfortunately, the father of the wife was a alim-e-din, he was a scholar. So he was looking for a family which had scholars in it, and he managed to marry a girl from a pious family. In those days, he used to work in the village. He was a farmer, so he used to basically work in the farms. He did not have his land, so he used to work in other people's farms. And whatever money he would gain from it, whatever salary he was paid from that services, he was content and happy with that. He had a risala, Tawziul Masail of Imam Khomeini, with him, which was a little different than the others. This one had a picture of Imam Khomeini on it. Like the narrative I gave you about the historical time, that during those days, how the Savak was, aggressive when it came to the religious concepts. Having a book, a religious book in your house is enough to get arrested and being sentenced for a long time. And a book with the picture of a scholar on it was a very, very threatening scenario. So Burunsi had a book in his house, the Tawzul Masail of Imam Khomeini, and he had the picture of Imam Khomeini on it as well. Then his wife says that my father had some books of Imam Khomeini with him as well, and whoever he trusted the most, he would give these books away to those people so that they can read and benefit from whatever Imam Khomeini had written in those books. Borunsi was also very active when it came to revolutionary acts against the Sawak and the Shah of the time. And she says that maybe it was the blessing of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that he had made these special arrangements and made these things available for Abdul Hussain Borunsi. She says that in the night when Borunsi used to come back from the work fully tired, he would sit down with her father, and her father, being the scholar, would read out the content of the Risala, Tawziul Masail of Imam Khomeini to him, and then discuss of some of the matters that Imam Khomeini has written in his books. This was more or less like a class for Burunsi. And these things that he used to discuss with my father used to take away all his tiredness, and you can see the glitter in the eyes of Burunsi when he used to learn about the Islamic concepts from the book of Imam Khomeini. Then she says that Burunsi was quite courageous, and he was very actively involved in the revolutionary activities. Once an Islamic scholar came to our village, and from the mimbar he recited stuff that was against the system of Shah and the Sawak. And the same night, Abdul Hussain Borunsi brought this scholar at our place and gave him refuge for the night at our home. However, his main activity started when the concept of distributing the farm land among the poor started off from the Shah. And then the lady says that during those days she also had a child, her eldest child, whom they named Hassan. And when the concept of the distribution of the farmland came across, a lot of people were really happy with that. However, I noticed that from this day onwards, Abdul Hussain Borunsi was really worried and tensed. I failed to understand why he was worried and tense. I used to see other people are extremely happy and the Shah is giving them a particular farmland. However, every time I would look at Abdul Hussain Borunsi, he was worried and tensed. I used to wonder that if the government is planning to give away farmlands to the poor people and the needy people, then what's there to worry about? Why is he worried, and what makes him so worried and tensed? And one time I approached him and I asked him that what is it that worries you about this farmland distribution? However, he did not answer me. He just said that everything will be ruined and they are trying to make everything najas. And finally, the Shah declared the distribution of the farmland to the poor people. One day, the people from the government offices came to our village and they asked everyone to gather in the masjid. They went to everybody's house and asked people, especially the men, to come and gather in the masjid so that they can take their share of the land. And at the same time, Abdul Hussain Borunsi came home and he went to the innermost room, and I followed him into that room. And then I realized that he's trying to hide somewhere. He's trying to find a place where he can hide. I was quite surprised, and then I noticed that he opened a big box and he hid in the box, and he told me, if they come asking for me, if they come looking for me, tell them I'm not at home. I said, tell them you're not at home? He said, yes. Tell them I'm not at home. And if they ask you, where am I? Tell them I don't know. I don't know. I was worried for last few days. And then when I saw all this, It just made me all angry. And after all this, I just asked him, why are you doing all this? What is happening? When everyone is getting land, everyone's taking land and becoming rich and becoming the owner of the land, why are you running away? Why are you hiding from it? He didn't answer anything, and the room was dark, so I couldn't see his face clearly, but I knew that he was really, really worried. I left the room, I came to the main hall, and in a little while there was a knock on the door. When I opened the door, I found there were some people who was looking for Burunsi. I told them he's not at home. Later on, some other people who were the elders of the village, they came looking for Burunsi. I told them he's not home. When they asked me where is he, I told them I don't know. Then later on, the people from the masjid came looking for him and asking for him, and I gave them the same answer. Until the government officers finished their job in the village and went back, Abdul Hussain Borunsi was nowhere to be seen. He was hiding in that innermost room. And finally, all the land was distributed. And when the government officers left, I very clearly remember that his parents came looking for him. Even the elders of the village had gathered to our place, and they were all trying to tell him and convince him that there is some part of the land that has been allocated to you, and hence, why don't you come and accept it? However, he replied, I don't want such a land. Then they said, if you don't take the land, then you will always be a worker and you will always be working in other people's farmland. Why don't you take some land and become the owner of the land? Abdul Hussain said, I'm okay to work in other people's land. However, I do not want such a land. They tried a lot to convince him. However, he was not convinced. Rather, he was telling them that you should not take this land too. You do not know what you are getting into. Later on, the owner of the land came to our house and he tried to talk to Abdul Hussain Borunsi. And he said, look, the government took the land forcefully from me and now they are allocating it to you. I know that when they took it from me, I wasn't okay with that. But now when I know that it is being allocated to you, I am okay with that. So you can take the land and I'm absolutely okay with that. However, Burunsi replied that you know that some part of this land belongs to the orphans, even though you're okay with that, and some part of your land might come to me. But what about the land that was taken away from the orphans and that were given away to somebody else? Now the wife says that it is now that I understood why he did not want to take that land and why he was saying that Shah is forcefully occupying this land and giving it away. And by giving it away what does not belong to him, he's making everything najis. Later on one day, he told me that whatever the tyrant ruler or the zalim hukumat gives, it is all najis. I don't want such things because this government is not worried about our progress and development. May Allah curse this government. May Allah curse the ruler of this government. He, the ruler of this country, has put the people of this country in such a huge predicament. After some time, when the documents were settled, a lot of people had become the owner of the land and they were busy working in the lands and making money. However, Abdul Hussain again got back to the land, pulled up his sleeves, pulled up his socks, and started working in the farmlands for others. At this time, my son was about 7 months old, and it was time to reap the produce. People were cutting the wheat, the barley, and the jawar, and they were taking back home. At this time, he came to me and he told me, from now onwards, we have to be extremely careful. I said, extremely careful about what? He said, extremely careful about this, that we do not eat anything from my father's house. And pay special attention to this, that Hassan should not eat even a little piece of bread from my father's house. I looked at Burunsi and said, how is that possible? Then I pointed at Hassan and I said, Hassan is their grandchild. However, Burunsi replied in a stern voice, I'm not okay with that. Absolutely not razi with it. Hence, you make sure that this does not happen. His stern voice showed that how serious he is about this matter. And for Itmam Hujjat, he went to his parents' house and he told them the same thing. And later on, I noticed that he himself had stopped eating anything from his father's house. Inshallah, we will cover the rest of the content in the next chapter. Until then, iltimas dua, Khuda Hafiz.